I'm Emma Louise Coffey and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. On this week's show, Garry, nutrition expert from Teagasc, discusses the main factors to consider for extending lactation of cows through the winter.
So before we decide to milk on cows through the winter, the first thing I would advise farmers to do would be to take stock of silage supplies on their farm, and I suppose work out how much fodder they need for their cows for the winter and how much extra fodder would be required to maintain those cows that are, I suppose, extra that they will milk on through the winter, especially if they are cull cows that will be empty and maybe surplus to requirements on the farm in other cases. I suppose that's the first thing, and if they have a deficit in that situation, especially if they're going to continue on milking on empty cows, I would advise maybe against milking on to the winter, because you will only run into problems with fodder supply maybe in the spring, and in that situation you will reduce the production of your spring calving cows because you will have inadequate forage supplies for them in the springtime.
So if we consider a cow, Brian, milking 15 litres at the moment, she's on a grass concentrate diet. When she's housed and on silage, what sort of silage quality does she require?
Yes, so I suppose ideally the higher quality silage the cow could get, the better, especially when she's lactating. So we'll be looking for silage there in excess of maybe 72 DMD would be advisable. Now I suppose across the country, given the year that I was in it, farmers are happy to get any silage in their supplies for the winter. So I suppose from that point of view, silage quality might be variable on farms, and I suppose our second cuts in particular might be down quality if they were harvested later or had a lot of stem in them, or depending on when they were cut, they might be very wet. So the quality of those mightn't be great for lactating cows. And so from that point of view, I suppose the answer to your question is the higher the quality, the better. But I suppose if it's in the 60s in the DMD, so if it's down at 66 DMD, it'll require more concentrate to be fed to the animals.
And like what sort of feed levels are you talking about in terms of concentrate? Like how low can you feed, and up to what limit would you go to maintain milk production?
Yes, so I suppose with late lactation milk, there's a couple of factors at play. I suppose first thing is how late lactation biology works in the animal. So the animal will produce milk. The yield of milk is highly dependent on the amount of energy produced, and this will come from the lactose concentration in the milk. So in order to maintain the lactose concentration, you need to feed enough energy to maintain that. So a concentrate there, probably at 3 kilos or thereabouts, will be advisable in lots of situations unless silage quality is very good. And when silage quality is poor, you could be looking at in excess of this. And I suppose when you go into higher levels of concentrate, especially given the prices this year, dairy rations making over €300 a tonne, it's highly possible that the margin on the milk you will produce will be very low to minimal in those situations.
And if we consider, like I'm talking about a typical silage concentrate diet, are there any other higher quality feeds that we could source for lactating cows in December, January?
There are other forages available, and I suppose if we look around the country, there are supplies of brassica crops there that are available for grazing. I suppose one item of note with them is to maybe limit the amount of them in a milking cow diet due to the risk of taint in the milk produced, which is one thing that can occur there. Other things such as fodder beet is a highly valuable crop for feeding to cows, very good source of energy, but there can be labour issues and maybe management issues on farm about how to chop it and to feed it out to animals, and that can be an issue on some farms where they haven't got the facilities to do that. Maize silage is also another option, but unless you are close to a place where maize was grown, it may not be a good source or a good option in that situation due to the high cost of getting it into the yard.
And just to go back on the brassicas, what sort of an upper limit would you have on the inclusion of the diet there?
I suppose you'd be looking at about 25% of the diet for a lactating cow. You can go higher obviously with the dry cow, but with the lactating cow, 25% is kind of where we're recommending.
Okay. And if we consider going back then, you mentioned lactose, and lactose tends to decline in late lactation. What is the limit in terms of that we wouldn't like to go below on farms for lactose?
Yeah, so lactose concentration is, I suppose, vitally important from a processability point of view. So for the milk to be used and made into a product, it needs to have a good lactose concentration. So we'll be looking to keep milk lactose levels there above 4.3 and ideally higher than that if possible. Once you go below that and even down below 4.2, you're looking at penalties there, which can be very severe and can be very, very detrimental to any income from that milk produced.
And then if we just turn our attention to body condition score, Brian, what sort of condition are cows in across the country at the moment?
Yeah, so just from looking at a few herds across the country that I visited recently, I would say that a lot of cows are in good condition, but due to the amount of concentrate that's been fed this summer, and I suppose even though there was very little fodder around, the cows were still well fed due to the amount of concentrate they were getting. Now I suppose that has a plus side that they're in good condition, but I suppose we need to monitor that over the winter and not to let it reduce. And I suppose depending on the forage quality that they get over the dry period, that will dictate how they calf down. But in general, cows are in fairly good condition, but as always there is thin cows in every herd, and there are cows that are probably borderline overfat in every herd as well.
And say, where we consider milking on a cow that is due to calve in April, when should we dry her off based on condition?
Yeah, so based on her body condition score, we would say, I suppose the first thing is all cows need approximately 8 weeks or thereabouts dry period. So that's about 2 months in advance, or 60 days really you'd want to be looking at for a dry cow, for them to heal up their udder and get ready for the following lactation. And I suppose if a cow is calving down the 1st of April, you wouldn't want to be milking them too late into the month of January. So you're looking at drying them off at the 1st of February thereabouts, and give them 2 months off there.
And where our feed supplies are adequate, so not necessarily happening on a lot of farms this year, would you expect to see any impact in subsequent lactations where you milk on?
No, provided the dry cow period is of sufficient length and the nutrition of the cows during the dry period is fine, so they have enough protein and time to recuperate, and they have enough energy in their diet and enough condition score calving down, there should be no knock-on effect on their subsequent production levels.
Has there been any work done in terms of the kind of a cost-benefit analysis? So where you're milking on, is there a financial benefit to a farm versus drying off, say, before Christmas?
Yeah, so I suppose there's probably 2 types of cows out there from this point of view. If you're looking at a cost benefit, there's the late calving cow and there's the empty cow. So if we look at the late calving cow, and I say you milk her on for 60 days and she's doing 15 litres a day on average, you're probably looking there in the region of an income from that cow about 330 to 360 euros over those 60 days. So you're looking there about 6 euros a day of an income. Where I suppose you have the costs for that cow, then let's say if you have feeding her 10 kilos of silage and you're feeding about 4 kilos of meal or maybe more, you could run into a cost there in the region of, I suppose, 100 euros or thereabouts for silage, and maybe another 80 to 100 euros for the meal feeding for that cow. So you could be looking there in the region of 200 euros in cost. So you might make 100 to 130 euros marginal over your feed costs. So then you have to include other costs such as labour, the cost of putting on the milking machine, and there'll be a critical mass for that as well. So you need to have enough cows to be able to justify turn on the milking machine as well, and all the other, I suppose, ancillary milking costs such as detergents and teat tips and so forth. So there's a large number of costs associated with milking on over the winter. It's not just the feed cost alone. I suppose for the empty cow then, where it's a different situation, I suppose, where there's not enough fodder available on farm, I would suppose you'd have to really question the economics of keeping that cow to let her eat a lot of silage to produce small enough quantities of milk over the winter period when you need that feed for other animals on the farm. And I suppose for that cow, the options might be to sell her off, even though cow prices are low at the moment, or else you could put her on maybe a high concentrate diet if you wanted to do that as well, and a minimal forage diet in that situation. I suppose the danger with that would be that she would cost a lot of money to keep the cow over the period, but I suppose over a short period could allow the cow to increase in her body weight and also produce milk at the same time.
Just to pick up on that, so if you have a late calving cow, the margin of production over feed, you're talking about 100 to 130 euro, and then you need to take in the other costs. Where fodder is tight, which is a situation on a lot of farms this year, what are your recommendations, Brian?
Yeah, so I suppose where fodder is tight, I suppose, and farmers have a very stressful year, I suppose, you need to maybe question, do you need to take a break, take a step back before the spring calving period and get a break from the milking process, I suppose. And other, I suppose, things I'd say there are that, have you facilities on farm to feed that cow? So I suppose, can you group those cows that would be milked over the winter separately? And I suppose on a lot of farms we see, or we go around to, we see not sufficient feed space on those farms for all the cows to eat. So in those situations where you haven't enough silage on the farm and you have to restrict feed or restrict the amount of silage they're getting, all the feed space available to the dry cow, let's say, and in that situation you'd want to maybe have the empty cows off the farm so that wouldn't complicate the system for that period of time.
That's great. Thank you, Brian. That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Brian Garry for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.